Hi everyone, I'm Mindy and welcome to my channel. Tonight's video, I am going to show you how I really stepped up my heat embossing with this brand new embossing powder. Now this is also featuring an exclusive stamp set from Simon Says Stamp and Mama Elephant, and this is for their STAMPtember collaboration. These are only available while supplies last, but this technique and embossing powder will be around for a while. So we have the Cappy Holidays with these adorable critters and holiday scenes and sentiments. Now, I'll be honest, I had to Google this because in some of the sentiments, it does give you the full name of this critter, and I had no idea what it was. So I did have to Google it. It is super cute, and I have seen images like this before, but I just never knew what the name was. So I stamped a couple images out on Expressive cardstock using jet black ink, and I'm going to be coloring them in using my OLO markers. I will have all of the markers that I'm using listed over on my blog if you ever want to reference that. I am going to speed up the coloring, and I'm going to leave all the coloring in here for you, but I am going to turn on some music, so I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you when I'm done coloring. Now that I have everything colored in, I went ahead and got these cut out. Now I don't have the coordinating dies, but they are available for purchase in a bundle. So here I'm bringing in the Postage Edge Rectangles from Spellbinders, which is a really fun set. It has a frame and then also another die to cut that postage edge. So this is what I was planning out, and I wanted to have kind of an ink blended background. So before I cut anything out of my cardstock, I trimmed out a piece of white cardstock that's going to be just a little bit bigger than that main rectangle. And I started by ink blending with Seafoam Ink on one side, and then brought in Cheeky Ink on the other side, and having them both kind of fade off into white, so it kind of has that real light touch right in the middle. Then I can bring in that rectangle, and I'm just lining up to see how that's going to look, and then I'll run that through the die cut machine to trim out my rectangle from that ink blended panel. Then I'll take the actual postage die and die cut that from white. So I really like how this is looking, but I'm going to work on a background for behind all of that. And to do that, I'm using the Outline Snowflakes background stamp from Simon Says Stamp. I haven't used this in a while, and I'm going to do some heat embossing. So while I'm doing this, I want to talk about the embossing powder that I'm going to be using because it is brand new from Hero Arts. They have a few of these iridescent embossing powders. I just got mine recently, and this is the first time I'm using them. And wow, it's really beautiful. So this is the iridescent blue. Now it looks kind of white, but you look at the cap and it's got that iridescent blue to it. I'm going to ink up this background stamp using white pigment ink. Now keep in mind, there are so many things that can change how this iridescent is going to look. The cardstock can be a contributing factor. The ink that you're using, for instance, embossing ink versus this white pigment ink. So keep all of that in mind if you decide to pick up any of those iridescent powders. Now I stamped that down onto Kraft Cardstock. I'm going to ink it up one more time just to make sure I have a really good impression. And then once I have that stamped down, I'm going to bring in just a scratch sheet of paper or copy paper, printer paper, and I'm going to hold my background over that, and I'm going to sprinkle on this iridescent blue embossing powder. Now, don't freak out when you first do this. I kind of did, but I went along with it to see how it was going to work. So I'm sprinkling on that embossing powder. I'm going to tap off the excess down onto that scratch paper. Now, when you first see your background, it's going to look like you have embossing powder everywhere. That, I'm pretty sure, is just the mica in that iridescent, because I did prep my cardstock with an anti-static powder tool. That's very important. You should do that every time you're doing embossing. But when you first do this, and when I tip my cardstock, you're going to see it looks like a ginormous mess, but just keep rolling with it. So I have my heat gun warming up, and you can see when I tilt it, look at that. It looks like I have embossing powder everywhere, but we're going to keep going. It's going to look amazing. So I'm going to melt this with my heat tool, and as that melts, it has kind of that white tint yet blue iridescent shine to it. It is absolutely gorgeous. So heat embossing is magical to begin with, but once you start bringing in specialty embossing powders, it just takes embossing to a whole new level. Now you're going to see I still have some of that stuff on my background after heat embossing, but just take a Swiffer cloth and buff over that. It's going to take all of that excess off, and we are left with this gorgeous iridescent outline. So I will bring this closer to the camera so you can really see it. This is the type of thing you really just have to have in your hands in order to see how gorgeous it is. I'm trying to capture as much of it in the light, but this has got to be one of my new favorite types of embossing powders right now. And this is only the blue. I haven't even touched the other ones yet. Now I need a sentiment for the front of my card. I have some black cardstock here and a sentiment off of that stamp set. I'm prepping that cardstock with the anti-static powder tool and inking it up in the white pigment ink again. And I thought I would give this a shot and use that blue iridescent embossing powder again. Now, I actually almost kind of panicked because it was looking so different than my background, but I needed to remind myself that this is black cardstock, so it's going to look just a little bit different when it comes to being on different colors of cardstock. Same thing if you were going to do this on red or green. It's just going to look a little different. So I sprinkled on the powder, tapped off that excess really well, and I'm going to melt the embossing powder, and you're going to see it really takes on that blue tint when you have it on black. Now this one definitely looks like it's a disaster, but keep with it. Let that embossing cool for a second and then just wipe it away with your Swiffer, and it's absolutely perfect. Now you can cut your sentiment out with a paper trimmer, or I'm going to use my sentiment labels die just to make sure I'm getting a really nice even and beveled edge. So now I'm going to add some splatters to my background, and I have had this, oh gosh, I always pronounce it wrong. Is it gouache? White gouache from Winsor & Newton. I have that in my drawer, and I'm going to kind of mix that with some water, and then tap it onto my background. Now I gotta ask if any of you have tried this before. I've had mine for a long time and it was kind of watery at the top. Like how do you can't shake it up. So how do you just keep squeezing the tube until it comes out nice? Let me know in the comments if you have any of this and have experienced that. So after my splatters are added to my background, I added that card front to a side folding card base. I'm adding my ink blended panel to my postage die panel using a tape runner, and then I'm going to add some foam tape behind my postage die panel to help pop that up. I'm also going to add some foam tape behind my tree, and I will be using the same type of foam tape. This is from Altenew. I have a huge variety of foam tape and foam squares, and I just kind of alter between all of them. Really, I feel like if I just use a little bit of each here and there, then I don't go through it as fast. It's just kind of my crazy thinking. So I went ahead, I added my image to that ink blended area, and I'm going to add black foam squares behind my sentiment, and then this is going to go right under that tree. I couldn't help but want to add some detail to my image, so I'm going to be taking a white gel pen, and I thought about adding little dots to my ink blended background, but instead I'm going to add little highlights to the presents and the critter, and then I'm also going to take that pen and add just little dots all over my Christmas tree. So I guess I'm going to look at it as maybe some pretty white lights on my Christmas tree. And then I'm going to top off my star on my tree with a little bit of stickles to add some more sparkle to this. And then we can take a look at the final project with all of that beautiful iridescent shine to this. So I will have everything listed down below in my video description and over on my blog. And as I mentioned before, this particular stamp set is exclusive and only available while supplies last over at simonsaysstamp.com. But the rest of the supplies should all be available depending on when you're watching this video. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you again soon with another card tutorial.